An annual salary of $5 million plus a $1 million signing bonus. Also, I'll pay off all your and your sister's debts. When the mysterious man, reeking of blood and disinfectant, made me this offer, in the sterile isolation ward of his top-tier biolab, my first thought was, am I crazy? Or is he? I was a genetic data analyst. 3 days without sleep and on the verge of bankruptcy. His name was Kane Vance, a name that existed only in legends. An invisible emperor who controlled the lifeblood of global biotechnology. And I, Ilara Chen, was just an insignificant data node in his vast empire. What I didn't know then was that he wanted far more than just my algorithms. He wanted to buy my future, my loyalty, and the secret my father had paid for with his life. It all started 3 hours earlier. That night, a storm of the century was devouring all of Chicago, the torrential rain threatening to wash away the steel jungle. And in the dim basement server room of a third-rate genetic testing company, I felt like I was the true eye of the storm. Elara, 3 hours left. My boss, a greasy middle-aged man who only understood sales, said with unconcealed impatience, if you can't fix the cascading database failure, you know the consequences. All our clients' genetic data will turn into gibberish. Not only will we go bankrupt from the lawsuits, but you and I will both go to prison. I stared at the waterfall of error codes scrolling down my screen, originating from our company's ridiculously buggy gene sequencing system. After 36 straight hours of work, my brain had turned to mush. Caffeine raged through my veins, and my temples throbbed as if they were about to explode. Just as I was about to break down, the office door opened silently. It wasn't my boss. It was 2 men in black custom-tailored suits, their expressions as cold as ice sculptures. Miss Ilara Chen, one of them asked, his voice low and magnetic. Our boss wants to see you now. Their boss was the founder of Vance Biotech, Kane Vance. So, are you feeling the same way I did? Things were starting to get weird, right? Why would a mysterious biotech tycoon suddenly summon an ordinary data analyst? If you want to find out what happens next, don't forget to hit that like button. It gives me all the motivation I need to keep the story going. I had no choice but to follow them into a black armored car. The vehicle eventually drove into a heavily guarded building downtown, the legendary Vance Biotech headquarters, Prometheus Tower. We took a private elevator to the top floor, a level never opened to the public, a massive biosafety, level 4 BSL-4, laboratory. The heavy alloy door slid open, and a pungent mixture of chemicals and blood hit me. Through the huge bulletproof glass of an isolation ward, I saw the scene inside. Several top medical experts were bustling around sophisticated life support systems I had never seen before. And there, lying on a bed in the center of the ward, was the man of legend himself, Kane Vance. Though his face was pale, his arm was connected to an IV drip, and his body was wrapped in thick bandages with blood seeping through. His face was like a masterpiece from a classical Greek sculptor. His deep-set eyes were like black obsidian, exuding a heart-stopping intensity, even in his weakened state. He spoke to me through an internal communication system, his voice a bit hoarse, but still full of power. Miss Ilara Chen, he began, I know who you are, the top expert in genetic data algorithms in the industry. Even though you're currently wasting your talent at a third-rate company, I know your father, Qingming Chen, was also a genius in this field. At the mention of my father, my heart sank. He had been a legend in gene sequencing, but 5 years ago, his reputation was destroyed by a so-called data fabrication scandal. He fell into a deep depression and passed away far too young. It was a wound in my heart that never healed. Did you bring me here just to do a background check? I responded coldly. He seemed unfazed by my attitude, a slight smile touching his lips. No, I brought you here to offer you a job, to become my chief data scientist, working exclusively for me. And then he dropped the bombshell that had left me utterly speechless. An annual salary of $5 million. In addition, a $1 million signing bonus, paid immediately. I will clear all of your and your sister's debts, including her exorbitant tuition at the art academy and any future studies. Kane Vance watched my shocked expression and continued. I know what you're thinking. It doesn't make sense, but it's that simple. Your talent shouldn't be buried. The first thing I need you to do is to fix a fatal algorithmic flaw in my Prometheus project. Not for business, but to save the future that might be coming. His gaze was as deep as a starry sky, as if he could see right through me. I knew this man was extremely dangerous, that his world was utterly alien to mine, but his offer was like the apple in the Garden of Eden, lethally tempting. My sister was everything to me, and her artistic talent couldn't be stifled by my financial struggles. What was I supposed to do? Reject this dubious, dangerous proposal, or grab the lifeline that had fallen from the heavens? In the end, I accepted. What other choice did I have? When Kane Vance's assistant placed a $10 million check and a detailed contract in front of me, I knew there was no turning back. The moment I signed my name, I felt like I had sold my soul to the devil. But the thought of my sister finally being able to pursue her dreams without a worry made it all seem worthwhile. The days that followed felt like entering a new universe. I was given my own top-tier laboratory, with access to Vance Biotech's best scientists and supercomputing resources. The epic Prometheus project was also unveiled to me. It was a super pandemic prediction system based on a global genetic database and AI deep learning. Its ambition was to predict and simulate any potential supervirus of the future and automatically develop the corresponding mRNA vaccine sequence. However, this grand plan had a fatal flaw. Its core algorithm had a tiny logical loophole that caused the entire system to make catastrophic misjudgments at critical moments when simulating viral mutations. My job was to fix it. Through sleepless nights and with the cutting-edge technology Kane provided, I found the bug hidden within billions of lines of code in just 1 week. I replaced it with a unique algorithmic model of my own. The entire project team erupted in celebration when the new system successfully predicted all the evolutionary paths of the next influenza strain in a simulation. My interactions with Kane became more frequent. His injuries healed quickly, and we often walked together in his private sky garden. We talked about gene editing, AI ethics, and the future of technology. I discovered that beneath his mysterious and dangerous aura, he was a man of unparalleled vision and unique charm. His mind was like a biological supercomputer, and his thoughts were as profound as the cosmos. Unconsciously, a strange feeling began to blossom in my heart. I found myself looking forward to our meetings, my heart racing at a casual compliment from him. This is too dangerous, I kept warning myself. However, a shocking discovery plunged all my fantasies into an icy abyss. One day, while searching for an old file on protein folding, I accessed the Vance Biotech Deep Database. With the clearance Kane had given me, I stumbled upon an encrypted folder named after my father, Qin Chen. On a whim, I opened it. The contents struck me like lightning. It contained the complete truth about the data fabrication incident from 5 years ago. There was no fabrication. It was a setup from start to finish. My father's research at the time had touched upon the prototype of AI-predicted viral evolution, a technology coveted by Vance Biotech's main competitor, Odin Bio. Odin Bio had bribed my father's deputy, forged the experimental data, and orchestrated the scandal, all to force my father to hand over his research. What was even harder to accept was the evidence showing that Vance Biotech knew the truth all along. Yet, they chose to stand by and watch as my father's reputation was ruined. In the end, they acquired his bankrupt research lab and all his data at an insultingly low price. The signature on the final decision document was Kane Vance. My world collapsed in that instant. The man I was beginning to trust, to even have feelings for, was one of the architects of my father's ruin and my family's tragedy. Shaking, I grabbed my tablet and stormed into Kane's office. What is the meaning of this? I slammed the tablet down in front of him. You knew my father was innocent all along, didn't you? You, you vulture, preying on his misfortune. Kane looked at the files on the screen without a hint of surprise, as if he had been expecting this day. He was silent for a long moment before speaking slowly. Alara, things are much more complicated than they seem. Complicated? What's complicated? The fact is, you stood by and watched him be destroyed just so you could get your hands on his technology. I screamed hysterically. That's right, he admitted, looking directly into my eyes. I did take advantage of the crisis Odin Bio created to acquire your father's technology, because I knew that, in the hands of a company like Odin Bio, that technology would become a weapon, but in my hands, it could save countless lives. He stood up and walked over to me, his eyes filled with pain and conflict. I admit, I made a cold business decision back then, but I can assure you, I never intended to harm your father. I had my people contact him privately, offering him protection and funding to continue his research, but he refused. His pride wouldn't allow him to accept charity from an enemy. So you just comfortably built your empire on his life's work? My face was wet with tears, my heart shattering. Elera. His voice became incredibly gentle. I know nothing I say now can undo the harm done to you, but please believe me. The reason I brought you here wasn't just for your talent. It was also a form of atonement. Just then, the emergency alarm in his office blared. Kane's head of security, a man named Adam, rushed in, looking frantic. Sir, it's bad. Alex, he's defected. Alex, Kane's most trusted CTO and a friend since childhood. He's stolen the core code for the Prometheus project and is about to trade it with Odin Bio, Adam said urgently. And he took someone with him as leverage. Kane's face turned to stone. Who? It's your sister, Lena. My mind went blank. Lena, my only sister, had been kidnapped. My God, what was happening? My father's wrongful accusation, Kane's deception, and now my sister's kidnapping. How was it all connected? I felt like I had fallen into a giant vortex with no escape. In that instant, all the hatred and resentment were replaced by fear and worry. I grabbed Kane's arm, my nails digging into his flesh. Where is my sister? Is she okay? Don't worry, I'm here. Kane's eyes turned sharp as steel. The suave tech mogul disappeared, replaced by a decisive, ruthless commander. He began issuing a series of commands, and the entire Vance biotech organization roared to life like a precision war machine. Soon, we located the transaction point, an abandoned port warehouse outside the city. Alex demands that you go alone, without security, and bring the complete Prometheus code base. Adam reported. The CEO of Odin Bio, the vulture Ivanov, will be there in person. He's suicidal, Kane said coldly. I'm going too, I stated firmly. No, it's too dangerous. Kane immediately refused. That's my sister. I stared into his eyes. Besides, I know the layout of that warehouse better than anyone. 5 years ago, my father was involved in designing its security and ventilation systems when it was a biological storage facility. It was an ironic twist of fate. My father's legacy was coming to my aid at such a critical moment. Kane looked at my determined gaze and finally nodded. Planning the rescue felt like being cooked in a pressure cooker. I deliberately avoided his eyes, pointing out weaknesses on the holographic layout of the warehouse in the most professional icy tone I could manage. My brain operated like a high-speed computer, shutting down all emotions except for one goal: save Lena. But I couldn't ignore him as he worked. He was no longer a CEO giving orders, but a true strategist, calmly anticipating every possible move the enemy could make. When he spoke of the traitor, Alex, a raw, genuine pain crossed his face. I trusted him like a brother, he murmured, almost to himself. I never thought he would use an innocent girl to get what he wanted. That unguarded moment of regret and pain caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw not the monster who had profited from my family's tragedy, but a man who was also wounded by betrayal. The line between black and white began to blur. The plan was quickly formed. Kane would pretend to agree to their demands and go alone. Meanwhile, I would join Adam's elite team, using the warehouse's ventilation system as a backdoor to sneak in and find an opportunity to rescue Lena. The night was as black as ink. The wind howled through the abandoned port, sounding like wailing ghosts. We successfully entered the side of the warehouse through a decommissioned underground drainage pipe. A micro-drone fed us a live view of the scene inside. Lena was tied to a chair, her mouth gagged, her face streaked with tears. Standing beside her was a man with gold-rimmed glasses, the traitor, Alex. Across from them stood a tall, bald man with a brutal face, the vulture Ivanov, flanked by a dozen heavily armed mercenaries. Kane walked in alone through the main entrance, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere. "Alex, I'm here. Let the girl go." Kane's voice echoed in the cavernous space. Well, boss. Long time no see." Alex sneered, adjusting his glasses. "Hand over the code base first, then we'll talk about letting her go. Mr. Ivanov here isn't a very patient man, you know." I knew we couldn't wait any longer. I whispered to Adam. "The fire suppression system in this warehouse uses a high concentration of inert gas. The controls are behind that shipping container behind them. If I can hack the system and trigger a release, it will knock them out from oxygen deprivation for at least 30 seconds. That's our window. How will you get there? It's a surveillance blind spot, but it's also in their direct line of fire." Adam frowned. "Trust me." I took a deep breath, recalling my father's old blueprints. There was a detail, an almost forgotten access tunnel for electrical maintenance, with an exit hatch right above that container. The next few moments played out like an action movie. Holding my breath, I crawled through the narrow duct, the rust and dust making me want to cough. When I peeked out of the hatch, I was directly above the mercenaries. Using a miniature terminal I carried, I quickly patched into the fire suppression system. "Go," I whispered into the comms. Instantly, a piercing alarm shrieked, and white inert gas flooded down from the ceiling sprinklers. Chaos erupted among the mercenaries. Adam's team, wearing oxygen masks, moved like ghosts in the night, precisely taking down the disoriented enemies. I dropped down in the confusion, rushing to Lena and cutting her ropes with a knife. "Ilara!" Lena cried, throwing herself into my arms, trembling. "It's okay. We're going home." However, it wasn't over. Two of Ivanov's personal bodyguards reacted quickly, shielding him as they prepared to retreat, and the traitor, Alex, pulled out a gun and aimed it directly at Kane, who was directing the operation. "Die, Kane!" he screamed maniacally in the split second before he could pull the trigger. I don't know where the courage came from, but I grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and swung it with all my might, smashing it against his head. Alex crumpled to the ground. The entire fight was over in minutes. Adam's team was incredibly efficient. Ivanov and his men were all subdued. When the emergency lights flickered back on, I saw Kane. He was walking quickly, no running towards us. He pulled me and Lena into a tight embrace, and I could feel his body shaking slightly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he kept whispering in my ear. "I swear, I will never let any harm come to you again." In that moment, all my defenses, all my resentment seemed to melt away. In this man's strong arms, for the first time, I felt something I could only describe as safe. After the adrenaline of the night faded, an unsettling quiet remained. Lena was sound asleep in the room next to mine after a doctor checked on her. I stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, watching the storm that had raged all night finally subside. But inside me, a far more violent storm was brewing. A part of me screamed, reminding me that this man was the architect of my father's tragedy, a ruthless opportunist. But another, quieter yet persistent voice replayed the scenes from the warehouse, the determination in his eyes when he saw Lena, the way he instinctively shielded us in danger, the undeniable tremor in his arms as he held us. How could one person be both a demon and a guardian angel? I hated what he did, his cold indifference when he could have intervened. But tonight, he had also saved the only family I had left. The contradiction was tearing me apart. I realized the Kane Vance I had imagined was just a one-dimensional villain. The real flesh and blood man was far more complex and far more human. The roots of hatred ran deep, but in that barren soil, a seed of something I was afraid to name understanding was beginning to sprout against my will. That night's events were a hurricane that changed the course of all our lives. The vulture Ivanov and his Odin bio were dismantled, brought down by charges of kidnapping, corporate espionage, and illegal arms possession. The once mighty empire collapsed overnight. Alex, the traitor, also received his due punishment, and Vance Biotech emerged stronger than ever, having eliminated all threats. Kane proved his words with actions. He held a press conference that shook the entire tech world. He not only revealed the truth about my father's case, restoring his honor, but also established a billion-dollar foundation in my father's name to support brilliant but overlooked young scientists like him. At the press conference, he stood by my side. In front of the world's media, he took my hand and said, "This is Lara Chen, the love of my life and my most respected partner." Under the spotlights, I looked into his deep eyes. The pain and conflict of the past were gone, replaced by an overwhelming tenderness and love. My sister, Lena, also recovered from the trauma of the kidnapping. Kane hired the best therapist for her and arranged for her to attend the most prestigious art academy in Paris. Before she left, she took my hand and said, "Sister, he's a good man. You have to hold on to your own happiness." Our lives finally returned to a state of peace. But it was a new kind of peace, filled with sweetness and hope. 3 months later, at the top of Prometheus Tower, in the Sky Garden, where we had first truly connected, that evening, Kane had prepared the most romantic dinner imaginable. The lights of Chicago glittered beneath us, as if the entire galaxy was shining just for us. "Ilara," he said, getting down on one knee. He opened a velvet box, revealing a uniquely designed diamond ring shaped like a perfect DNA double helix. "I know I've caused you so much pain. Is the rest of my life enough to make it up to you?" "You fool," I said, tears of joy streaming down my face. "It was enough a long time ago." He slipped the ring on my finger, and we embraced in a kiss. And so, our story comes to a close. A story that began in a storm finally found its beautiful rainbow. I went from a burnt-out data analyst on the brink of collapse to a woman standing side by side with the man I love, ready to create our future together. My life has been a roller coaster, full of dramatic highs and lows, unbelievable coincidences, and an extraordinary fate. But I'm grateful for all of it, because it led me to Kane. It allowed me to find love and hope in the midst of despair. If you enjoyed this story and were moved by our journey, please don't hesitate to give it a like and subscribe, because everyone in this world might face their own storm. But please believe that, as long as you don't give up hope, a rainbow will be waiting for you when it passes. I'll see you in the next story.